Speaker, before you left last week, there was a communication you were supposed to give to the House with regards to the leadership of the minority side. Mr. Speaker, there was a sudden departure on your part, and said we didn't understand what was happening. And in the afternoon, I think your deputy came and took over the House, which we understand. Mr. Speaker, in case you leave for a trip or elsewhere, or you're committed elsewhere, we understand. When your deputy takes over, he actually assumes the powers of the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when your deputy was sitting on that chair, I don't know whether he acted with your instructions or outside your instructions. Because number one, there was that communication you're supposed to deliver, which you had promised that you're going to deliver in the afternoon. And secondly, he seemed not to be aware I thank you, Speaker. He seemed not to be aware that there was communication to be made. So, Mr. Speaker, that is what brought all the hell loose here. Mr. Speaker, finally, what I want to say is, now that you're back, and now you're in charge, this question of communicating, our communication to your office, has not yet been done. Could you be kind enough to communicate on the communication with regards to the leadership of the minority side? We are being suffocated on this side, Mr. Speaker, for lack of leadership. Because I stand alone, the rest with my deputy. But I don't have a whip, I don't have a deputy whip. As I've already communicated to you, with regards to these changes, would you be kind enough, now that you're back to your chair, as the Speaker of this House, communicate to us with regards to the changes of the leadership that I placed before you? I thank you.
Point of order, Speaker. Senator Mandago, what is your point of order?
My point of order, Mr. Speaker, is in reference to Standing Order 101. Is the minority leader in order to mention the names of the Deputy Speaker and cast aspersion in his conduct sitting as a chair and the Speaker of the Senate in your absence, Mr. Speaker?
You'll have the opportunity to speak, Senator Sifuna. Let me just dispense with the point of order by Senator Mandago and Senator Mazayo. Honorable Minority Leader, you've been in this Senate longer than most of the senators in this House. The Speaker, the Deputy, and the Speaker's panel, any member who sits on this chair exercise the powers of the Speaker. And I remember the Honorable Senator of Nairobi defining the word speaker to include the deputy and the members of the panel. So let us not split hair. The deputy speaker, while sitting on this chair, was exercising the powers of the Speaker of the House at that particular juncture. And whatever he said, whatever he ruled, is deemed to be the ruling of the chair and is binding. I cannot sit in appeal or sit in review of an order that was made by the Deputy Speaker or any member of the Speaker's panel. So if indeed there was a ruling that was made by my deputy, that is the ruling of the chair. And I'm not in a position, pursuant to our standing orders, to disturb that ruling. And indeed, going to what Senator Mandago has raised in a point of order, Minority Leader, you cannot certainly discuss the conduct of the Deputy Speaker. The Standing Order 101, as quoted by Senator Mazayo, is very clear. The Deputy Speaker was sitting as the Speaker. He ruled as the Speaker, not a lesser Speaker. And therefore, we abide by the rulings made by the Deputy Speaker, if there are any rulings that are made, unless I'm told no ruling was made. But if there was a ruling that was made, then that ruling is binding. I cannot disturb it. What's your point of order, Senator Sifuna?
Mr. Speaker, first let me say that I am personally glad that you are back on that seat as a substantive Speaker of this House. Because, and I'm happy with the last thing that you've said about the powers of the Deputy Speaker and members of the Speaker's panel. Because, Mr. Speaker, the person who made it an issue was the person who then was sitting on that seat. We, in fact, made the argument that there cannot be business that is brought before the House that then we are told has to wait for the substantive Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the problem we find ourselves in is that the matter of the communication, and the Hansard will bear me witness, the matter of the communication of the changes in the leadership of the minority side, we were told here that that communication has to wait for the substantive Speaker. And in fact, if you look at the Hansard proceedings of that day, Mr. Speaker, you will remember me asking the question, if indeed a matter as simple as a communication cannot be made by a person other than the substantive Speaker, then really no one else would have the power to transact any other business, because in my view, communications such as the ones you've made about the people who are, or the visitors we had in the gallery, is a matter so simple and straightforward that it doesn't have to wait for the substantive Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having listened to you this afternoon, first of all, I, as a senator elected to this House, I am ashamed of the things that have happened in the past 2 weeks, and I bear that shame together with all the members of this Senate. Mr. Speaker, we came here to discuss substantive matters that affect the people of Kenya. And if we are going to address what the significant difference is between the first session that we had as a House and this particular session, Speaker, we must go to the root cause of all the events of the past 2 weeks. It is not enough for us to be admonished, to be told we are behaving unruly or in conduct that is not in line with the standing of a member of this Senate. We as a House must ask ourselves, and I asked this question last week, what happened to the collegiate nature of the debate that we used to have in this particular House in the first session, Mr. Speaker? And if you were following those proceedings, our position has remained that, in fact, the Speaker of this House has no role whatsoever in dealing with the matter of a communication in the changes of the leadership of the minority or indeed the majority side. Mr. Speaker, we have come to this particular juncture because of a matter that, in our view, is a very straightforward matter. The minority have made a decision to change their leadership. All that we are waiting for is this communication. Mr. Speaker, we have likened this to a soccer game between Gor Mahia and AFC. And when the coach for AFC stands up to make a substitution, The referee in the game says you cannot make that substitution. Mr. Speaker, it is absurd because we want to be able to respect the rules of this House. Our greatest frustration, Mr. Speaker, is when we see the application of these rules being selective, Mr. Speaker. So it would not offend me, Mr. Speaker, for instance, if somebody misconducted themselves and I saw fair application of the rules. Mr. Speaker, we are very serious people. We have very serious agenda here. As a senator of Nairobi, this morning, Mr. Speaker, I saw my traders from Nyamakima. They were in the streets, Mr. Speaker, exercising their rights under Article 37 to demonstrate peacefully about the invasion of the Chinese into even the retail market in this country. They wanted to present me with this petition so that I can come and canvass these matters here, because that is why they elected me. But we are stuck in this circular motion, because the last time, if I remember correctly, Mr. Speaker, we even thought that there was some middle ground, that there was some truce that was reached between the leadership of the minority and the leadership of the majority. In fact, people apologized here, Mr. Speaker, for the conduct of that particular session. And our expectation was, because terms of a truce, Mr. Speaker, must be observed. I was not in that meeting, and the meeting was expressed to have been a meeting in your office. But, Mr. Speaker, what we are wondering is what has happened to that spirit that was here on Thursday last week. Because we expected that now the matter of the communication would be addressed. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go beyond that because I would like to give other colleagues opportunity for them to also address themselves to this matter. But, Mr. Speaker, please let us address the root cause of this problem, and you will not see any sort of misconduct from any side if this matter, the root of the matter is addressed, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cheptumo. What's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate the submission by my learned colleague. But, Mr. Speaker, it appears to me that is challenging the very decision that we have made, the direction we have given. Mr. Speaker, you are not, I think I have to allow the Speaker to console.
Proceed, Senator Cheptumo.
Because, Mr. Speaker, when you are away, the direction given by the chair then was that he was not giving the communication because he had been stopped by a court order, not because the substantive speaker was not present. I think, Mr. Speaker, that is really the way I understood that time. So I think my colleague is misleading the House that the communication was not given because the substantive speaker was not present. It is because there was a court order that actually stopped the speaker from issuing the communication. Mr. Speaker, I think that is the true position as at the time when the matter came before the House.
What's your point of order, Senator Ledama?
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by thanking you for making that communication. And I think it's about time that we set matters straight. I want to comment on your communication, maybe just react to it in a very civil and polite manner. You've indicated, which I completely agree with you, that this House shall be guided by the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, I want to request you to abide by that onwards so that we can be able to make progress. I'm happy that you referred to Article 107 of the Constitution that gives authority, or your authority as the main speaker, to anyone else seated in your seat. We have an issue that relates to the minority side. I think, Mr. Speaker, if we are being true to ourselves, then I would beseech you to look back into the standing orders so that the standing orders do not end up becoming a sword that only cuts one side. The sword should be, if it is used for both sides, if the standing orders are quite clear and they are explicit in terms of what should follow, then that should be the case. The main bone of contention, Mr. Speaker, has been on Standing Order number 23. The other main issue has been on issue sub judice. These are the two matters that this House has pronounced itself more than once on what should ensue. So, Mr. Speaker, following on your communication, I'd like to beseech you to re-examine everything that has happened here. Yes, today you found it, fit to reprimand us for our behavior. And being very polite, I would say the standing orders have been drafted to guide this House. It will be very unfair if the standing orders will only be used to reprimand any senator who complains, but when a matter is completely explicit, it's overlooked. So, Mr. Speaker, now that you're back, I'd like to invite you to relook at the standing order, particularly Standing Order number 23, and look at the communication that was given by the minority side, and then give us a way forward so that we can be able to put this matter to rest. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sampson.
Mr. Speaker, while I agree with the minority side that within the standing order, purview of Standing Order number 23, Mr. Speaker, there is a process in which they can change their leadership, and it is within their purview as minority. What I don't agree is that when they do not want to follow the rule of law. Because last week, Mr. Speaker, whether you were there or the Deputy Speaker, the office of Speaker subsists. There was directions that were given that was a court order. And in fact, Senator Sifuna and I think Senator Utsosi indicated on issues of political parties tribunal, that is where they thrive. And they assured before, and you can check the answer, they assured the House that they will go back and ensure they resolve that issue within political parties tribunal on the issue of change of their leadership position, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it was within your right to reprimand, because I remember even when I was walking on the corridor, Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't know how can I put my colleagues were even removing the name of Senator Fatuma Dulo at the door of the minority whip, yet they want you to follow the same law. The law is a double-edged sword. If you want the Speaker to rule and give a decision on a particular issue on change of leadership, Mr. Speaker, I beseech my colleagues in the minority side, Mr. Speaker, sir, and it's being read by Senator Stewart Matzaya and my prayerful friends, the Deputy Senator Wambua Kio, that let us follow what the standing order and the law says. Because last week we subjected this Senate to unnecessary ridicule. I remember even and my colleagues who we served in the last Senate, including Senator Ledama, we even had a more contentious issue that was on issue of revenue formula. But the House, Mr. Speaker, sir, did not degenerate up to the level as the Speaker. You are reprimanding the House. Yet that one was more emotive because we were discussing about revenue. We had even, I'm not saying on this issue of minority leadership we should have a bipartisan approach because it is the issue of the minority side. It is within their purview. But we ended up, Mr. Speaker, agreeing on the issue of revenue formula, which was very contentious then. And I know most of colleagues who had not joined us then were also following those deliberations, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the minority side. They should not force you to communicate on their change of leadership. And we said in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, on the supremacy of the Constitution. As a Speaker, you have a right to protect the Constitution. You are not a conveyor belt. The fact that the minority side or majority want to change, if it is something that is unconstitutional or illegal, you cannot just be a conveyor belt where you just read a communication simply because the standing order says the Speaker shall not, Mr. Speaker, sir, you have an obligation to protect our Constitution. You have an obligation to build a precedent, to a tradition of the Parliament, so that I would hate, Mr. Speaker, to go the same path, that when the majority side, then the Jubilee, change the House leadership then. We don't want to set that precedent, because that precedent is when the Speaker, at that time, Governor Lusaka came and read the names. He didn't give a ruling. He never gave a ruling, and he left. So we cannot go through the same path. And at that time, Mr. Speaker, so let us enrich this process so that people who are purporting to change leadership, Mr. Speaker, if they want to change leadership, is it majority or minority, at least they are aware that when you bring your names to the Senate, you want to change the way you change your clothes, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't happen that. There must be a process. Mr. Speaker, I appeal to you, don't be intimidated, don't be blackmailed or be forced. You are our Speaker, we elected with you. You must stand with the rule of law and fidelity of the law. And the minority side, Mr. Speaker, should be patient enough and allow you to draft your communication. You are a man who is a seasoned lawyer. I know you might be in page 20 in your dispense of wisdom in this matter of minority side. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. I wish I could refer Senator Cherargei to Standing Order 105, but let that matter just rest there. The Speaker, there is no senator, either on the majority side or the minority side, who is trying to force the Speaker to do anything that the Speaker is not supposed to do. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your communication. But as the Deputy Minority Leader, Mr. Speaker, I also want to go on record to clarify that what the Majority Leader did when he stood on a point of order was to actually just remind you that the Deputy Speaker, whom we all respect, had taken an obligation, he had committed himself, that upon the return of the substantive Speaker, the matter of the leadership of the minority will be communicated. Mr. Speaker, it's actually a big shame, Mr. Speaker, not just to the minority side, but to our collective consciousness as a Senate, that for 2 weeks, now the third week, we are stuck in the rut talking about the leadership of one side of the House. The Speaker, I am not a lawyer. I have never attended a law class. But, Mr. Speaker, I have taken the liberty to really study the standing orders. I can't even pretend or claim to understand these standing orders better than you do, Mr. Speaker. My understanding of the standing orders of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, is that the Speaker of the Senate, on matters political leadership, has no ruling to make whatsoever. That's my understanding. That's my plain reading of the standing orders. That once either house of the Senate, either the majority or the minority, follow the procedure of changing their leadership, the only duty that the Speaker has is to communicate that change of leadership. The Speaker, what we have done in the course of the last 2 weeks, and now the third week, the Speaker, and I urge you to reject this invitation. We, and I say we very deliberately, we are inviting you to be a judge on matters political leadership. We are inviting you, the Speaker, to make a ruling on a matter that you have absolutely nothing to do with apart from just communicating and satisfying yourself that the side that makes any changes has followed the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, it should be written one day. I hope it will not be said that when the Speaker, Right Honorable Jefferson Kingi, presided over the Senate of the Republic of Kenya, that is the time that the rain started beating the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. The Speaker, yesterday, this side, the majority side, and we respect them, made a decision to change their leadership in their political party. Mr. Speaker, we have absolutely nothing to do with that. It's their decision. We cannot lecture them on who should have. If it was left for me to say, I would have said perhaps Senator Veronica has done a good job. Let her continue doing what she has been doing. But I have nothing to do with that, Mr. Speaker. Why is it that when the leadership of the minority, Mr. Speaker, has followed the standing orders, as you have reprimanded all of us to do, why is it that after we have complied with every provision, every comma, every sentence in these standing orders, why is it that the majority side wants you to make a ruling on that decision, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, my appeal to you is that, and as Senator Sifuna said, Mr. Speaker, we have serious issues facing this country. Serious issues. In fact, when the people who have elected us to this Senate see us wrangling and fighting and shouting over the leadership of the minority side, they wonder what kind of leaders did we elect to the Senate. People were going without food for days, Mr. Speaker. Today, when I was getting in, a certain mzee called me from Kitui County and said his children have gone without food for 2 days. And he wants me to find a way of just sending something so that he can buy food. Mr. Speaker, that is a call of leadership. This matter of the leadership of the minority side, Mr. Speaker, I urge you as I conclude, please, Mr. Speaker, refuse, reject the invitation to play any role in the determination of who becomes what on either sides of the House. Mr. Speaker, lastly, when we sat here and we decided that we want to change the leadership of our side, and we decided to replace Senator Dulo Fatuma, the senator for Isiolo, with the senator for Narok, Ledama Olekina. The Speaker, the thing that happened on the floor of this House is highly regrettable. That the senator that was replaced took the microphone, called our side all manner of names, and said, if you want this thing, take it. I'm not interested. The following day, Mr. Speaker, that senator went and sat on the majority side. Mr. Speaker, what more evidence do we need that Senator Fatuma Dulo, the senator for Isiolo, has lost the authority to whip this side? Mr. Speaker, whipping is not just a position that is given to members. There is a responsibility to do. You have to mash your members to take a vote. You have to mash your members to make decisions, Mr. Speaker. Tell me, please, Mr. Speaker, who among these members here would allow to be whipped by Senator Dulo? Mr. Speaker, so that we don't paralyze the operations of the minority and by extension, the operations of the Senate, I urge you, Mr. Speaker, to do that which Standing Order 23-4 requires of you, and we move forward. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.